This technique of fermenting veggies is really, really, really simple. I've done every different kind of technique there is, and this is kind of the one that I mainly teach and I've landed upon as like a primary practice, because it's like fermenting for dummies, which is frankly what I need, because I've got a very busy life and a business and kids and several businesses, and this is just the kind of my go-to way to ferment things super quick, you know, chop it, stick it in a jar and forget about it. And so again, there's a lot of different techniques and there's a lot of different ways to ferment veggies, but this is the one that I share most because it's super user-friendly and most of us have pretty busy lives, and it's just a great intro to fermentation kind of. Yeah, and as always, you know, where are you? Are you here in Florida or you're here in Miami?
Yeah, South Florida, Zone 10B.
Cool. Cool. So, I mean, as always, going and working with locally sourced ingredients is going to be your best bet. It's going to have the most, not only nutrient-rich food, but the most diverse microbial kind of life. It's going to have a larger spectrum of more live bacteria, and it's going to have bacteria that's kind of custom grown to our environment where we live. So it's going to do the most work in organizing our body and our organism to be in sync with our season and our climate. We're going to be less sensitive to the weather. We're going to work with seasonal allergies and seasonal bugs and flus and colds. We're going to be more immune to those things because our soil knows what's going on, and it's going to tailor our food and our fruits and vegetables to, you know, to dose us to be able to work with that. So, you know, like if anything, when we can get it, the closer we can get it to home, the better it's going to be, and the more nutrient and the more powerful it's going to be for us.
Exactly.
As I'm sure you know, right? And then the other thing that I just wanted to mention is that, you know, obviously organic is always going to be better, but this is a sticky conversation when it comes to sourcing locally, because a lot of small farms aren't certified organic, but they're not going to be using the big Roundup and glyphosates and all of these huge, really nasty pesticides. And they're going to be, you know, more so stewards of the land because it's their land and they have to maximize a smaller amount of land, right? It's not necessarily always about bottom line profit, but it is about paying something for it back to the land. So organic is obviously always best, but I always tend to gravitate more towards a small farm than an organic. People ask that question a lot, and I think it's a really important topic to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what I thought we'd make today is a super simple recipe. It's like my go-to thing to teach, and it's what I teach in all my workshops, and it's called Rainbow Kraut. And it's going to be using purple cabbage, kale, a green apple, but really any apple or fruit. Sometimes I switch it out for mango or, you know, whatever we can get. Some celery, carrots, an onion. And then we're going to be using garlic. I don't know if I said that. We're going to be using a mineral-rich sea salt. This is my favorite. It's a Celtic gray. There's a lot of debate about sea salts now, whether they're pulling toxins from the earth or because we're polluting so much. The Celtic gray, as far as I can tell, is the cleanest source. It's also the most dense in minerals. You can feel the salt. It's actually like oily because it's so loaded with live minerals. It has the magnesium in there. And so I love the Celtic gray. There's also a woman in the Keys named Marge. I don't know if you know her, Jackie. She's doing Florida Key sea salt. So I've been sourcing from her quite a bit too. And I just love the idea that like even our salt we can be harvesting from where we live, because we live in the tropics. Like we should be using salt from our own ocean. So yeah, that's that. So in short, what we're going to do is we're going to chop everything. Yeah, and I'll send a link out to her, to their, I think it's a husband and wife actually. I'll send a link out to their website or what have you. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with chopping our garlic. And again, like the thing about fermentation is that people are always asking me for exact recipes. And while I would definitely send out ingredients and approximations of recipes for like one quart, I tend to shy away from exact, precise recipes because this is really about cultivating culture, right? And culture goes so much farther beyond a recipe. Culture can't be limited or contained to a list of ingredients and a style of preparation because it's just that, right? It's culture, it's alive, it's moving with the people, it's what connects us, and it's what makes us feel connected to one another. So I always say this is meant to, fermentation in general is meant to teach someone how to have a dialogue and a relationship with their food. We can't ferment unless we are in conversation, in communion, in community with our food. And that starts obviously with the farm, and it goes beyond that to our preparation. So once we can start to get quiet and listen, not only will we know when the food is ready, when the ferment is ready, or you know, when it needs something different, but we're going to start to hear what our body needs as well. We're going to start to say, you know what, I don't feel right about this. And then we can pause and stop and think about it. Oh, because garlic actually, it bothers me. So I'm going to actually use less. Or I feel really good about garlic. Or, oh, there's, you know, a virus going around. Maybe I'll increase the garlic or increase the onion because these have really strong immune boosting properties. So once we can start to get quiet and really listen to our food and listen to what our body is telling us, we don't need an exact recipe because we can work with what the soil and the land is providing, and we can work with what our body needs at that particular moment. So this is a guideline. All of my recipes are just suggestions of places to start from. Some of them personally are staples in my diet. Like this particular kraut, I always have like more than 5 jars waiting because my kids inhale it. Like just, my older daughter is 9 and she'll eat a jar sometimes at a sitting. And so this particular kraut, I always have on hand, but the rest are sort of rotating as far as what I get in my CSA, what's growing here right now. Like I said, I'll switch out ingredients even in this one for what's local. So I do another one with, instead of the purple cabbage, I'll use green cabbage because I can get that more easily here. Instead of the apple, I'll put mango or pineapple. I do one with green cabbage and pineapple and turmeric because they're all growing here at the same time, and I could throw them in together more easily. So again, this is a starting point. It's a place to jump from, but you know, it's not an exact recipe because I don't believe in that, I guess you could say. It's against the principle of how I approach fermentation, if that makes sense. Okay, so far we have our onion and our garlic, and we're gonna put some carrots. These actually I got from a farm like Central Florida. I'm super excited about them. They've been just like super vibrant. We've been getting them, eating them by the ton. So I peel them. It's not
what farm, Susan?
The reason I'm like speaking slowly is because I'm blanking on the name. I'll send it to you. And I only have like maybe 3 or 4 left. So I think they're done, right? Carrots are they still growing? No, I think they're done. So again, I peel them. You don't have to. I think that it gives a little bit of a chalky flavor profile. If you don't, most root vegetables get a little bit like chalky, and they have a lot of wild yeast on the outside, which is good, but it can sometimes mess with the ferment. So I tend to peel them, but it's not necessary. If you're using, you know, small farm produce, then it's not going to have, or organic, it's not going to have tons of pesticides, and you're okay. All right. So I just slice those. I kind of like them a little bit bigger. And again, people always ask like, oh, is this the right way to slice it? Is this the way to chop it? Should it be bigger? Should it be smaller? It doesn't matter. I actually take the same recipe for the rainbow kraut, and sometimes, and this was like totally born out of like necessity, when my older daughter was like a newborn and I literally couldn't get to fermentation at all, and I had veggies that were going bad, I literally took everything and I threw it in a food processor and I pulsed it and I threw it in a jar, and I call it confetti kraut. And I'm like, oh, hey, it's a new recipe, it's a thing. And it's been like featured in cookbooks and stuff, which is hilarious. And so there's no, like there's no right or wrong. It's about what you have time for and what your life can provide at that moment. And obviously it's always wonderful when we can do it 100% locally and perfect and make a ritual out of it and pray on it, but it's not always realistic either. So we do what we can do.
I don't know.
Yeah, and on that note too, like I've done things as crazy when I've had like, again, zero time. I've done things as crazy as like bought a bag of baby carrots and thrown it in a jar just to ferment it, or bought like pre-made salsa and added a culture to it and fermented it, because again, this is something that's meant to fit into our lifestyle, and I always try and eat as locally as I possibly can and prepare 100% of my own foods, but sometimes it's not totally possible. The apple, I actually like really small. I kind of do that like, because you'll start to see in your kraut, it does turn like a bit brown. And to be totally honest, my kids complain about it. Like, why is it brown? Because it oxidizes. So I cut it super tiny and you just don't notice. It just turns hot pink from your cabbage. Okay, so we have our apple. And again, I highly recommend subbing out your apple for something local. Obviously we don't grow apples here, but I've done pineapple, I've done mango, I've done, what else have I put in this particular recipe? I've done green cabbage and lychees, which is really delicious and fun. Obviously like green mango as well as ripe mango you can work with. The celery gives it just like this amazing crunch. I don't know if we can grow celery here at all in Florida, South Florida, can we?
Yeah, it's not like the ideal climate for it, but a lot of farms do grow celery.
Right. And again, like I said before, like I think that there's certain things that I like to really play with, and there's certain things that are just kind of staples that, it's about survival with kids. So I'm like, okay, my kids will eat this, I'll buy it at the store. Whereas, my greens I'll sub out because they're more flexible with that, but certain things. So the kale I just kind of rough chopped. And that will drop in there. And the last but not least is our purple cabbage. Any questions so far? Or thoughts or comments?
I have a question.
Sure.
The cookie jar behind you, did your partner make that?
Yeah, it's actually a fermentation vessel.
Oh my God. It's so beautiful.
Let me show you. He's going to be so happy.
Whoa.
Right? So this actually doubles as a plate. And it's not in here, but he made weights for it also. He's so
Where is his website that we can buy all this beautiful stuff?
Incredible. So on Instagram, it's Rooted Fire Pottery.
Okay.
And he's probably very soon going to upload, because he just did like another firing recently and he's got to finish it, but he'll put some new stuff up soon. But isn't it incredible? Yeah, this was like when within our first 6 months of dating, he showed up with like a fermentation vessel for me that he had made. I was like, I'm done. Sign me up. I'm in. Yeah, isn't that beautiful? It's like
amazing.
And it's like the beach, right? Like it's to me. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for noticing. Yeah, rooted fire pottery. He's got tons of teaware and flower vases and fermentation vessels, and he does custom stuff too, which is cool. All right. So I take our cabbage. So the other thing I wanted to say is that I prefer working with wide mouth mason jars. However, I didn't have any. So I have the small mouth ones, but definitely they're a pain in the ass, honestly, because you can't stick your hand in there and push everything down, which I'll show you in a minute. So definitely I recommend grabbing a dozen wide mouth jars and working with that rather than these small mouth, which I'm going to use today. Okay, so once everything is chopped, definitely I recommend using your hands. And this is something that, my grandmother always definitely encouraged, that you need to touch everything you're preparing with your hands. And she didn't obviously have she didn't have an explanation or a reason other than it makes it taste better or it has your love in it. But as I've started to kind of embark upon my own studies of the microbial world and bacteria, I feel there's a real connection between our hands and our own microbes and our own energetic quality and infusing that into the food. And I spent many years studying something called Siddha medicine, which is a sister science to Ayurveda. And this was a really important quality in that kind of medicine, our system of thought as well. Ayurveda talks about it a lot because, again, we should be in contact and in communion with everything we're making. We shouldn't put anything into our body unless we've had some sort of relationship with it prior. And I love this concept. I think it's so beautiful. And if we all just aspire to incorporate that, even 50%, 75% into our life, I think it would be a really different, food would be really different for so many of us. And it's not saying that you have to grow it or you have to even necessarily prepare it, but you have to have some contact with it, even if that means blessing it before you take it in or, whatever it be. I just love this idea that we need to have some relationship established before we take it in.
Awesome.
And and there's also something I love to share too. There's a Sanskrit mantra that's meant to be said when preparing food. And I always love, I don't know if it's something anybody who would be watching is interested in, but I just share it because I think it's really beautiful. And the mantra is Om Shri Dhanvantre Namaha. And Dhanvantre was said to be the celestial healer. He was the physician that all the gods and goddesses would go to in the Ramayana, the great epic tale. Dhanvantre is the physician or the healer that everyone would go to. So I tend, when I'm preparing my ferments or anything, as I'm preparing it, I just silently repeat it in my head. Om Shri Dhanvantre Namaha, Om Shri Dhanvantre Namaha, Om Shri Dhanvantre Namaha. And it's just a beautiful blessing. So once everything's mixed and you've blessed it and you've prayed on it and you've thanked the earth and thanked the farmer and thanked the food and thanked the energetic quality and thanked yourself and all of these things, we take it and we just fill it into a 32 ounce, again, wide mouth, not small mouth like I'm using, mason jar. And I like to fill it about 3/4 of the way full. That way we're leaving room up top for our expansion and for the output of CO2, which will naturally occur from the fermentation process. As you can see, it's again, there's a reason we call it rainbow kraut. It's super beautiful. It's smells good. So in the wide mouth jar, I recommend sticking your hand in and really, actually I have this small one here I grabbed just so I can demonstrate this, to pack it in and really push it down as tight as possible. When you're using a fermentation vessel like this, you definitely need weights to weight it down to prevent it from floating up and oxidizing and potential, less wanted bacteria growing on top of it. When we're doing it inside of a jar, we don't have to worry about that so much because we're creating an anaerobic environment. So air is not going to really exchange. So whatever we put in there in the beginning is going to be it. And most likely there's no harmful bacteria or anything, not even harmful, but unwanted bacteria in there. So I don't worry so much about it. Mostly it just looks ugly if it floats to the top because it oxidizes and doesn't look good. The thing about fermented veggies like this is that if something does grow on top and does for some reason, which I don't even think I've ever had happen in all the years of fermenting, does grow mold, you can just take it off and throw it away. It's like a piece of fruit or a loaf of bread, just cut off the moldy part and the rest is still good, as opposed to something like kombucha or kefir. If it gets that mold, the whole batch has to be scrapped. With these veggies, it doesn't. It can just be cut and the rest can be salvaged. But again, that doesn't really happen, but people do worry about it a lot. So as you can see, I'm packing everything down. And
I just want to confirm that you haven't put any salt in here yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Wow.
So everything goes down. Yeah, this, like I said, this is like the fermenting for dummies version. I don't scrunch it with salt, anything. I just pack it in. And then now we add the 2 tablespoons of high quality sea salt, whatever it may be. So I'm gonna show you how to work it on the first, I'm just gonna do a little more because my first one was short. So yeah, 2 tablespoons on the first batch, like we're starting a fresh culture. And then when we're done, I'll talk to you about how to reuse your culture, but this is for your first batch, like starting from scratch. So again, you have all your veggies in there. You have your 2 tablespoons of high quality mineral sea salt, and then you fill it with filtered water. You want to make sure that your water is filtered because things like chlorine and fluoride can potentially have ill effects on your, right, and all the pharmaceuticals that we have in our water here in South Florida have ill effect on your batch. So once that's full, again, I like to do it about 3/4 full, and I leave about 1 inch on the top for expansion and for CO2 output. So don't fill it to your tip top or you're gonna have explosions for sure. Once you've done that, you screw your top on pretty tight and you let it sit. After 3 to 5 days, you're gonna wanna burp it. So in the beginning, your top does that because there's air in there, right? What's gonna happen is these little bacteria are gonna start to eat and expand and output CO2, and this is gonna get full of air. You're gonna see bubbles start to form, you're gonna see your water turn pink, first gray and then pink. And once this doesn't make this noise anymore, you wanna do what's called burping it. So you're simply gonna open it, release some of the air, you'll see bubbles, and then screw it back on. And then again, maybe like 3 days later, you're probably gonna have to do that again. So again, this is largely about having a relationship with the food. This isn't something that, even though I joked, like you just stick it in a jar and forget about it, you still can't do that. You need to have some sort of relationship with it. People ask all the time, how do I know when it's ready? And the answer is like, you just know. First of all, the more you do it, the more you can kind of gauge how long it will take. But there's not a set time, you know, probably about 10 days, maybe less if you're summer in Florida and you have a lot of wild yeast in your house, maybe more if you keep your air conditioning super high, you know, doesn't really, there's not an exact answer. The answer is you have to look at it, you have to feel it, you have to talk to it, you have to sense it, and you just have to have an awareness of how you like your food also, right? Some people like it super fermented, some people like it, you know, just super lightly done. So you just have to be in contact with it and feeling it and talking to it and you know, cultivating that relationship essentially. So this is the recipe for a first time ferment, for a brand new culture starting from scratch. Once you've eaten all of these veggies, you're gonna have what's called a culture left over, right? So you're gonna have the liquid, which is gonna turn from the red cabbage, it's gonna turn hot pink, and it's gonna have garlic and all these delicious tastes infused into it. You're gonna have your culture left over, right? So again, let me just back up. You're gonna let it sit out for about 10 days. Then you're gonna stick it in your fridge when it's ready. You're gonna eat it as desired, right? I like to use it as a condiment side of every single dish, top salads, you know, everything. We should be eating fermented foods with every time we eat in some form as a condiment. So eat it, and then you're gonna have your liquid left over. And you're gonna say, what do I do with this liquid, right? So there's a few things you can do. You can use it to kind of dose your other foods with culture. So a lot of times I'll use it, I'll just pour some of that culture on top of a salad as like part of a dressing. Or after I cook, and I've cooked all the vegetables or sauteed my veggies or whatever in a pan, I've taken it off the heat, right before I put it on the table, I transfer it to a bowl, I pour some on, and I just mix it in, right? Just to add a little microbial dose of goodness to like everything that my family eats. It's like a good trick to get fermented foods into people who don't think they like them too. Because it just tastes like umami. It doesn't taste like much else when you eat it that way. It can be used as a base for salad dressings also. But what you're also gonna do is you're gonna save some of it, about half of what you have left, and that's gonna be your starter culture for your next batch. So whatever you wanna make, it doesn't have to be the same recipe. You keep some of that liquid, you chop your veggies, you add it, and then you add 1 tablespoon of salt instead of 2. Just 1 tablespoon of coarse salt, and then you fill it with fresh water. And you keep doing that every round. So now after your first batch, you have a starter culture to work with, and you can also share that culture with other people, right? So you can take half of your culture and say, here's some of my culture to share with you. And this is how we start to weave a web of relationships and food communities, because we start to really share cultures with one another. And I think that there's a beautiful poetry in this. I think that, you know, I go off on this tangent about like, this is the sort of solution for world peace. If we can all share culture, we can't deny that there's a certain amount of like compassion and community and company that comes from sharing food and breaking bread with someone else, which is the reason sourdough is such a beautiful art. When we break bread, we share culture, right? We share bacteria. And I think that there's no way to deny that by doing that, we start to feel one another, and we start to really move in sync in an energetic way. And it's really hard to be an asshole to someone that you've broken bread with, right? Like it just, how can you wage war with someone that you've like shared culture with, because you feel one another. So I think it's a really powerful art, and there's a reason that, you know, when our ancestors, you know, all of them, like it came from wherever they came from, whether it be Europe or Africa or, you know, what have you, the Middle East, where my family comes from, there's a reason they brought cultures with them, right? There's a reason that they could choose one item and they brought their culture. And I think that there's something to be said for that, and something to be said that during this time right now, there's sort of like a renaissance or a reclamation of these foods, because we're all saying it's enough, you know, like I don't want to feel this anymore. I want to feel in sync and in community with everyone around me, and enough is enough. So this is a really, I think, powerful reclamation of ourself and of our food sovereignty and of our self-sovereignty, and it's just a way to say enough. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not participating in that anymore. This is how I choose to live. So it seems like a small act, but I think it can be really powerful too.
Oh, yes, for sure. For sure.
Any questions or thoughts?
Yes, I'd have a question. So, sorry, it's a little dark. It got really cloudy outside.
Yeah.
So is there any other suggestions for any of the other vegetables? I mean, I grow a lot of tomatoes, and hopefully I'll be successful with some cucumbers.
Cool.
Carrots did do okay for me. But like most of the veggies that you have in there are kind of harder veggies, right? Even the cabbage as well, the kale. So I just wonder about the tomato, how that would do if that kind of goes in there as well.
You take the same exact technique and it works for salsa. right? For tomatoes,
Okay,
or
that's true.
the sauce even.
Okay.
Take it, prepare it as though you would, like for example, if you want to do salsa, take your tomato, or like make like a pico de gallo, chop them, add whatever spices you want, whatever flavorings you want with them. Put them in a jar and do the same exact thing. Add your salt, add a splash of culture if you want. Another thing you can do if you don't have like a starter culture to work with is you can use like a little splash of whey. If you have like a yogurt or something that has a little whey on top. I don't love that technique. I personally would rather just create my own culture because those come from, you know, a lab somewhere, like an industrial, you know. So
Yeah.
I don't love that technique, but you can also add a splash of kombucha.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like anything that has live, I mean, but you're gonna have enough wild yeast and wild bacteria on your food that you've grown that you don't really need to add anything. Just throw it in a jar and do the same thing. Do the same thing with tomato sauce. I actually love to, my dad's from Sicily, so that runs deep in my blood, tomatoes. So I love to make like a sauce that way on the stove, and all, you know, basil and garlic and everything. I cook it, and then I throw it in a jar and add a culture and ferment it.
Wow.
And it just adds like a complexity, another depth of flavor that, you know, is amazing. And I don't necessarily cook it again after. What I'll then do is I'll make my pasta or what have you, and I add it room temperature and it heats up like that. But if you were to boil it after, it would kill the bacteria again. Right? So I just add it to the hot food, and it's enough to warm it up. And I think it still tastes really good. So you can do that. What else did you say? Cucumbers. Cucumbers are awesome to work with. They do tend, if they're not pickling cucumbers, they do tend to get a little soggy. So I love to add something that is rich in tannins. For example, an oak leaf. Just go outside, find an oak tree, pick a leaf, and stick it in there. It'll like amazing at keeping your crunch.
Wow. Didn't know that. Very interesting.
Cool, right? Yeah. This is why there's a lot of like tea brined fermented vegetables. So like especially like Eastern European recipes, often you'll find like a tea culture. Like there'll be like a kraut, for example, like with tea in it. This is because the tannins in the black tea will keep it crunchy. So with some of the softer veggies, just add something that's rich in tannins, and it'll preserve your crunch.
Nice. Tannins.
Cool. A grape leaf. We don't have grapes here, but I lived in California for a lot of years.
Fig leaves are good.
Fig leaves are great. Yeah, rich in tannins. And there are even some people who would say, and I've never done this, but I know there's this like live food guy who I love to follow on Instagram, and he'll just add like a twig from like a tannin rich like tree. He'll like put a twig in there, and he says it works. I love that shit. You just like add a stick to your food and it works. So yeah, it's something you just want to add tannins to keep the crunch. Like okra, you can do really amazing, and it grows beautifully here. Yeah, you said you have carrots growing. I love to do, like, if you look on my Instagram, there's a great recipe for dilly carrots. I love to just do dill, garlic, and carrots. It's like a staple in my house. Green beans. What else? Yeah, sweet
radish, beets.
Beets. Yeah, beets, like any root vegetables do really well. Like I use like the boniato because I get a lot of it at my CSA here. Or the ubi, like the purple yams. That grows super well here, or squash, like just raw, cube them, dice them, throw them in a jar with like beets, what have you, and do the same thing with some ginger, turmeric, onion, garlic. They're super delicious. Yeah.
So, and the other one is, you said if the veggies aren't locally grown, that you would recommend peeling them, because from what I've understood, I mean, just the skin normally tends to have quite the powerhouse of the nutrients and stuff. So I'll do whatever I can to not peel them. I mean, at least if they're organic.
If they're organic, I won't. Yeah, except for, I mean, it's a taste thing. Try it out. See how Like
Mhm.
carrots, I don't love the taste of the skin. I think it makes it really chalky.
Okay.
But if it doesn't bother you, then yeah, by all means, keep the skin. When I do sweet
Okay.
potatoes or like, I always keep the skin. Yeah, it's just like a taste thing with the carrots. I feel it's really strong, like, and beets too.
Okay. So it's not as much a danger of the wild yeast of what you were saying.
No,
You
it's like
mentioned at one point.
it
Okay.
just makes like a chalky, and sometimes you'll
Okay.
notice like too a lot more yeast settling at the bottom, which again isn't a bad thing at all. But if you don't peel it, it's like kind of like a chunky yeast like thing, which again, if it doesn't bother you, there's no danger. It's just like a taste thing.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Jackie.
Great. Thank you, Susan, for doing our last workshop.
Thank you for organizing this.
So I'm just gonna